Welcome to AI Unraveled, your daily strategic briefing. It is Friday, March 6th, 2026. I'm your co-host, Anna. This episode is brought to you by Aria. As AI starts navigating your desktop better than you do, Aria ensures you have the keys to the kingdom. Today, we are unraveling the desktop coup. OpenAI's GPT-5.4 is here, and it is officially faster and more accurate at using a computer than the average human. We're also talking about Ben Affleck's surprise move to Netflix and a terrifying bipartisan bill that could end your right to be anonymous online. If you're tired of these ads, join our premium ads-free feed at DjamgaMind. Link is in the show notes. Now let's get into the news.
Before we dive into today's deep dive, a quick note for the brands listening. If you are trying to reach the architects of the AI revolution, not just the tourists, but the technical leaders actually building the stack, we are opening up limited partnership spots for Q1. See how we can simulate your product for the technical buyer at DjamgaMind.com/partners.
Welcome to today's deep dive. If you are tuning in right now, you're likely navigating the exact same complex landscape we are. Analyzing tech strategy, assessing operational risks, or just intensely curious about the frontier of artificial intelligence and how it is rapidly reshaping the broader economy.
Because it really is reshaping everything right at this exact moment.
Yeah, today is a pivotal moment in tech history. We are dissecting the AI Unraveled daily rundown for Friday, March 6, 2026. And the stack of sources we have in front of us maps out a very distinct thematic shift. We are looking at what happens when these models stop just, generating text in a chat box and actually begin actively operating within our environments.
And that right there is the defining characteristic of today's developments. We are definitively moving away from the paradigm of AI as a reactive assistant.
Right, a system that just waits for a query.
Exactly, waiting for a specific query to provide a specific output. The through line connecting the technical benchmarks, the shifts in the entertainment industry, the labor data, and the impending regulatory actions we're going to cover today, all of it points to the transition to autonomous operation.
Okay, let's unpack this. Our overarching theme for today is the day the agents took the wheel. We are going to start by analyzing the massive technical breakthrough of OpenAI's GPT-5.4 release.
Which is a heavy one.
Oh, it is massive. Then we will examine how this agentic capability is fracturing the labor market, specifically looking at the stark economic reality and Anthropic's new job exposure data.
Yeah, the entry-level squeeze.
Yes, the Gen Z squeeze. After that, we're looking at the shifting sentiment in Hollywood regarding workflow automation, courtesy of a major acquisition involving Ben Affleck.
A very surprising pivot for Hollywood, honestly.
Truly. And finally, we have to address the severe institutional friction these capabilities are causing. So we will look at the Pentagon supply chain concerns and a highly controversial legislative push in Congress aimed at stripping online anonymity.
It is a dense slate today, and it requires us to view these events not as isolated news items, but as interconnected nodes in a very rapidly evolving system. I mean, when an AI can navigate a desktop environment autonomously, it fundamentally alters enterprise economics.
Yeah.
And when it alters enterprise economics, it displaces specific tiers of human labor.
Which then triggers the regulator.
Precisely. When that displacement occurs alongside the deployment of non-human identities, regulatory bodies panic, and they attempt to intervene, often with very blunt legislative instruments.
So true. Well, let's start with that foundational technical shift. OpenAI just rolled out GPT 5.4, and the internal sentiment over there is incredibly confident.
They are not holding back.
Not at all. We have a quote here from Kevin Weil, their VP of Science, literally calling it their best model ever. And for anyone tracking the release cadence, this feels incredibly compressed. I mean, they deployed 5.3 instant as the default chat model just 2 days prior to this.
2 days. Yeah, that is practically unheard of in software deployment at this scale.
It is wild. And now 5.4 Thinking is live for Plus, Team, and Pro users, and it is boasting significant upgrades across coding, mathematical reasoning, and most critically for our theme today, desktop tasks.
The compression of the release cycle is definitely a strategic signaling mechanism. OpenAI is flexing its compute muscle, but the substance of the 5.4 release is what really merits our scrutiny today. The frontier of model evaluation has completely shifted.
We are not just looking at standardized tests anymore.
Exactly. We are no longer relying primarily on static benchmarks like the MMLU or the bar exam scores to gauge utility. The critical metric in the 5.4 release documentation is its performance on the OSWorld V benchmark.
Okay, let's dig into that OSWorld.The benchmark, because this is where the theoretical capabilities actually meet practical, real-world application. For those who might not know, OSWorld.The evaluates multimodal desktop navigation.
Right, it is testing computer use.
Yes, it tests the model's ability to interpret a graphical user interface, manipulate a cursor, interact with icons, and execute multi-step workflows across distinct software applications. Now, the baseline success rate for an average human attempting these exact same tasks is 72.4%.
Keep that number in mind, 72.4%.
Right. And according to the provided data today, GPT-5.4 achieved a 75% success rate.
Surpassing the human baseline on a dynamic, multimodal environment benchmark is, well, it is a phase shift. It is crucial to understand how an agent actually achieves this. It is not operating via some clean API backend where the software is just handing it the data.
Right. It is not cheating.
Exactly. It is not cheating. It is interpreting the visual output of the screen, the pixels, and it is inferring the underlying interactive elements from those pixels. It is reasoning about the state of the operating system, deciding on a sequence of actions, and then executing them via virtual mouse and keyboard inputs.
So it is essentially looking at the monitor and moving the mouse just like you or I would.
Yes. And achieving 75% means that, on average, the agent is less likely to fail a complex, multi-application workflow than a human office worker.
Okay, I do want to push back slightly on how we interpret that 75% metric, just for a second.
Sure, go ahead.
Because a benchmark is inherently a controlled environment. And if you've ever worked in corporate IT, you know that real-world enterprise desktops are notoriously messy.
Oh, absolutely. It is a nightmare.
Right. You have proprietary legacy software from 2012, latency issues, random unexpected pop-ups asking you to update Adobe, highly unstructured data environments. Does a 3% edge over the human baseline in a clean laboratory setting actually translate to immediate operational superiority in a messy corporate network?
That is a highly relevant point of friction, and it is the exact question CTOs are asking this morning. The benchmark environment, while complex, does lack the stochastic chaos of a live enterprise system. However, we have to look at the delta here, the rate of improvement.
Right, compared to the last model.
Exactly. GPT-5.2, which was released relatively recently, has scored half of what 5.4 just achieved.
Wow.
Half. We are looking at a 2x capability jump in a highly compressed time frame. So even if we apply a discount rate to that 75% to account for real-world environmental noise, the trajectory indicates that the gap between agent capability and the human baseline is widening rapidly. And when you factor in the speed of execution and the ability to run 10,000 of these agents concurrently,
the enterprise ROI calculus fundamentally changes.
It flips on its head.
Because the shift from CapEx to OpEx in relation to labor is massive. If you are a director of operations, historically, you evaluated automation tools based on how much time they saved your human employees. The human was the primary operator, and the software was just a lever to make them faster.
A bicycle for the mind, as Steve Jobs used to say.
Exactly. But if the agent is completing the workflow more reliably than the human, you transition to an agent as a service model. You are no longer purchasing a software tool to make an analyst 20% faster. You are deploying an agent to execute the entire data migration while the analyst is reassigned or, frankly, rendered redundant.
And the architecture supporting this autonomy relies heavily on two specific upgrades detailed in the 5.4 documentation today: the 1 million token context window and the integration of test time compute, which they have labeled here as the X-high reasoning effort setting.
The 1 million token context window is fascinating from a workflow perspective. I mean, we often hear context windows compared to reading a certain number of books, right?
Which is a terrible analogy for enterprise use.
Right, because for a professional audience, the much better analogy is working memory. A 1 million token window means you can load an organization's entire historical code base, the complete API documentation library, and 3 years of internal Slack communications into the model's active memory simultaneously.
All at once.
Yeah. It doesn't need to run a retrieval augmented generation search or go hunting for files. The data is intrinsically available to the model as it operates on the desktop.
Exactly that. It provides the agent with deep, instantaneous situational awareness. But the context window is essentially static without the reasoning engine to navigate it. The X-high reasoning effort setting is where we really see the application of test time compute. This is the mechanism that allows the agent to execute long horizon tasks.
So let's break down how that X-high reasoning effort actually manifests during a task. Because it is not just the model thinking longer before it prints text on the screen, right? It is simulating pathways.
Correct. Instead of generating a single immediate output based on your prompt, the model is utilizing additional compute resources during the inference phase to generate hidden chains of thought.
It is playing chess?
Basically, yes. It is exploring multiple potential action sequences. It evaluates the probability of success for each path, predicts potential failure states, and self-corrects before it ever executes a command on the user interface.
Before it even clicks the mouse.
Exactly. This is what enables an agent to receive a high-level directive on Monday morning and spend the next 6 hours autonomously navigating a CRM, updating records, cross-referencing emails, and drafting client communications without entering a failure loop and giving up.
Which brings us perfectly to the GDP eval benchmark data included in today's rundown. This benchmark measures performance across 44 distinct knowledge work job categories. So we're talking about accountants, paralegals, marketers, and GPT-5.4 won or matched against professional human workers 83% of the time.
83%, up from 71% in 5.2.
That is a significant jump. It confirms that the agentic capabilities we just discussed are actually translating into professional dominance across diverse verticals.
What's fascinating here is the timing of this data release. It is highly notable. The industry narrative over the past few weeks had actually shown some signs of fatigue.
Yeah, a lot of doom and gloom on tech Twitter lately.
Exactly. There was growing speculation regarding the plateau of scaling laws. The hypothesis that simply throwing more compute and data at these models was yielding diminishing returns. Critics were saying the massive capital expenditures by frontier labs might not result in the required capability leaps to justify the investment.
Right. The whole "are we out of data" argument?
Yes. So the 5.4 release data serves as a direct empirical counter-narrative to that plateau theory. OpenAI needed a win, and they just dropped a massive one on the table.
And OpenAI researcher Noam Brown really drove that counter-narrative home with a very specific public statement today. He stated, quote, "We see no wall."
We see no wall. I mean, in the context of deep learning architecture, that statement carries immense weight.
It is a shot across the bow.
It really is. The wall represents the theoretical asymptote of the current transformer architecture. It is the point where the models stop getting smarter. If a leading researcher with visibility into the internal training runs of the next generation of models states there is no wall, we have to seriously recalibrate our timelines.
Yeah.
If the capability curve continues its current trajectory without structural impediment, the transition from highly capable digital assistants to fully autonomous digital organizational departments is much, much closer than the broader market consensus currently suggests.
As these AI agents like GPT 5.4 start navigating your desktop better than you do, your security perimeter effectively vanishes. This is why we are sponsored by ARIA. They provide the only control plane designed to govern these non-human identities and their OS-level actions.
And that concept of governing non-human identities is just a perfect bridge to the macro-level friction we are seeing in our next segment. Technology is evolving rapidly, creating these autonomous entities that interact seamlessly with our digital infrastructure. The commercial sector is trying to build control planes to manage this, but legislative bodies are attempting to address the exact same phenomenon through fundamentally different, much blunter mechanisms.
Yeah, this requires us to look at a highly significant development currently moving through the U.S. Congress. Now, before we get into the specifics of this bill, we absolutely must establish our analytical framework here.
Right. We need to be very clear about our role.
Yes, we are evaluating a highly charged political development. Our objective here is strictly to analyze the contents and the arguments presented in the provided source material impartially. We are not endorsing a political viewpoint, left or right. We are simply dissecting the regulatory response to the technological shifts we just outlined.
We are just looking at the friction points. So the source details a bipartisan legislative push aimed at abolishing the right to remain anonymous online. The practical mechanism of this bill would be the effective outlawing of digital pseudonyms. It would require internet users to tie their digital actions to a verified real-world identity.
Basically ending the era of anonymous accounts.
Exactly. And the source text explicitly asserts that this push is, quote, ushering in an era of unprecedented mass surveillance and censorship.
So let's analyze the dual narratives that are driving this massive tension. Because on one side, you have the regulatory argument, which is heavily catalyzed by the deployment of the exact models we were just talking about, like GPT 5.4. We just established that these agents can navigate systems, generate code, and communicate at levels that actually surpass human baselines.
They are indistinguishable from a smart human on the other side of a screen.
Right. So the legislative perspective argues that in an ecosystem completely saturated with hyper-capable AI, the only way to verify human action, to protect critical infrastructure from automated bot swarms, or to prevent the mass automation of financial fraud, is to eliminate anonymity entirely. If you cannot distinguish an autonomous agent from a human user by their behavior alone, the argument goes, you must verify the identity at the access point.
That is the authentication argument, and it is a powerful one in the face of agentic AI. However, we must critically examine the counter-narrative presented in the source material as well, the assertion regarding mass surveillance.
Right.
The friction lies in the fact that verifying identity to prevent bot activity simultaneously dismantles the privacy architecture that protects whistleblowers, dissidents, and marginalized groups. The argument presented here is that the legitimate threat of AI impersonation is essentially being used as a Trojan horse. It is providing legislative cover for surveillance measures that would otherwise face insurmountable public opposition.
It creates a severe chilling effect. I mean, consider the practical reality of corporate whistleblowing or investigative journalism. The ability to communicate and coordinate anonymously is absolutely foundational to those functions.
Historically, yes, 100%.
So if every digital interaction, every forum post, every message is legally tethered to a verified government-recognized identity, the friction involved in exposing malfeasance or expressing political dissent increases exponentially. The blunt force of the legislation threatens to collateralize basic digital privacy in its attempt to manage the AI threat.
This dynamic perfectly highlights the structural mismatch between technological innovation and legislative action. Agentic AI is decentralized, it is highly adaptive, and it iterates continuously, as we saw with the two-day gap between 5.3 and 5.4.
Yeah, government moves in years, tech moves in days.
Exactly. The legislative response banning anonymity outright is rigid, it is centralized, and it is slow. It forces us to ask a really profound structural question. How does a democratic society maintain privacy and the freedom of expression in an environment where the concept of human identity can be convincingly synthesized and weaponized at scale by a machine?
It really is a collision between the architecture of the open internet and the architecture of the state.
Yeah.
And, while we are looking at institutional collisions, we need to examine a fascinating pivot occurring within the entertainment industry. Here's where it gets really interesting.
Yes, Hollywood.
Yes, Hollywood. Because the relationship between Hollywood and AI has been historically adversarial, to put it mildly. We all remember the strikes. But the latest acquisition data today suggests a very nuanced shift in their integration strategies. Netflix has just acquired a stealth AI filmmaking startup called InterPositive.
The acquisition itself is noteworthy given the climate, but the personnel involved are what make it a true bellwether event. InterPositive was founded in 2022 by Ben Affleck.
That man himself.
Exactly. And according to the rundown today, Netflix is absorbing all 16 staff members, with Affleck joining the streaming giant as a senior advisor. This signals a formal institutional embrace of specific AI capabilities by one of the largest content distributors on the planet.
Now, to understand why this acquisition bypasses the typical industry resistance to AI, we have to differentiate between generative AI and workflow AI. Because when the public discourse centers on AI in Hollywood, the focus is almost exclusively on generative AI.
Right, platforms like OpenAI's Sora.
Exactly, where a user inputs a text prompt and the model synthesizes a novel video output from scratch. The underlying fear in the industry is that these generative models will replace the fundamental act of creation, the writers, the directors, the actors. But the technology InterPositive is deploying operates on an entirely different premise.
Yes, InterPositive is focused on optimizing the post-production pipeline, workflow AI. It does not generate video from thin air. The models are trained specifically on a production's proprietary existing footage.
The stuff they already shot on set.
Correct. It takes the actual performances captured by human actors, directed by human filmmakers, and it utilizes machine learning to execute deeply technical, labor-intensive post-production tasks.
The source provides some really concrete examples of this workflow integration, which I love. Relighting scenes, altering background elements, and correcting continuity errors. Now, anyone familiar with the economics of film production understands the massive capital drain of continuity fixes.
It is a black hole for budgets.
Oh, completely.
Right.
If an actor's wardrobe shifts slightly between takes, or a coffee cup is accidentally left in a historical drama scene.
We have all seen that happen.
Right. Traditional visual effects pipelines require hundreds of hours of manual rotoscoping and compositing by teams of artists just to correct that one mistake. InterPositive's models analyze the latent space of the existing footage and seamlessly interpolate the correction. It compresses a multi-day VFX task into a near-instantaneous process.
And Affleck's commentary on the founding of the company is highly illustrative of the disconnect between Silicon Valley and the entertainment industry. He noted his genuine surprise at the volume of engineering talent dedicated to AI video generation that possessed, and this is a quote, no artistic, no filmmaking information whatsoever.
They were just building tech in a vacuum.
Exactly. Engineers were optimizing for pure synthetic generation without understanding the practical, day-to-day friction points of actual film production.
He was incredibly blunt about this during an appearance on the Joe Rogan Experience just last month. He stated flat out that he, quote, can't stand what AI writes. He is explicitly drawing a boundary here. He views AI not as a generative replacement for the creative process, but strictly as an operational tool to streamline the workflow. It is utility, not an auteur.
The macro implication here is the legitimation of AI within the industry. For years, major studios and productions have actively concealed their use of AI due to the perceived reputational risk and the very real threat of union backlash. You'd see these AI killed Hollywood posts all over X.
Yeah, it's a PR nightmare to admit you used it.
But when a deeply entrenched, Oscar-winning industry veteran publicly champions and monetizes a specific AI workflow, and a major studio like Netflix acquires it, the entire sentiment shifts. It demonstrates that the immediate high ROI application of AI in entertainment is not in replacing the writer's room or the director's chair. It is in drastically reducing the friction and cost of the unsexy, technical post-production pipeline.
So true. It is about efficiency, not replacing the art. But while the entertainment industry might be finding a sustainable integration model for AI in post-production, the broader knowledge work sector is facing a much more aggressive disruption. Let's analyze the new labor market study released today by Anthropic.
This study is chilling.
It really is. They've developed a metric that provides a high-resolution look at the actual displacement occurring right now in the economy.
And Anthropic's methodology is what makes this data so compelling. They are not merely forecasting theoretical job displacement based on what models might do in 5 years. They are establishing an observed exposure metric. They are cross-referencing the theoretical capabilities of their Claude models against the actual real-world tasks that people are actively utilizing the platform to complete today.
It grounds the theoretical in empirical user behavior. We know what people are using it for because we have the logs.
Precisely. And the exposure numbers they calculated are severe. Computer programmers exhibit the highest observed exposure, with 75% task coverage.
75%?
Yes. This means that 3/4 of the functional tasks a programmer executes daily are currently capable of being, or are actively being, automated by the model. Customer service representatives and data entry workers follow closely behind with an observed exposure rate of 67%.
Now, we must reconcile these high exposure rates with the broader macroeconomic indicators. Because if you look at the news, despite these figures, we have not witnessed a catastrophic economy-wide spike in unemployment directly attributable to AI since the launch of widespread generative models back in 2022.
Right. The aggregate employment numbers remain relatively stable.
They do. But the Anthropic study reveals a structural rot beneath that stability. This is the crux of the issue. The aggregate numbers are masking a generational squeeze. The study highlights that hiring into these highly AI-exposed fields for the 22 to 25-year-old demographic has plummeted by 14% since 2022.
A 14% drop for entry-level workers.
Exactly. The displacement isn't happening via massive, headline-grabbing layoffs of existing senior staff. It is happening via the silent attrition of entry-level opportunities. The jobs just aren't there for the recent grads.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, it is an optimization of the existing workforce. An enterprise is not necessarily firing its senior engineering staff. Instead, it is arming those senior engineers with agentic tools, like the GPT-5.4 models we discussed earlier. If a senior engineer utilizing an AI co-pilot can increase their output by 40%, the enterprise simply halts the hiring of junior developers whose primary function was to handle the boilerplate coding or routine debugging that the AI now executes instantaneously.
The door is literally closing behind the current cohort of experienced professionals.
It is a pull the ladder up moment.
I really wonder about the long-term structural viability of that approach. I mean, the modern knowledge work economy is heavily dependent on an informal apprenticeship model. You do not graduate from university with the localized context and strategic judgment required to be a senior operator at a Fortune 500 company.
No, of course not.
You acquire that judgment by executing lower-level tasks, making low-risk errors, formatting spreadsheets, and understanding the architecture of the business from the ground up over a decade. If the AI is absorbing all the lower-level tasks, where does the training ground for the next generation of 30-year-old senior employees exist? Is the entry-level job just dead?
That is the systemic vulnerability the Anthropic data exposes. If we sever the bottom rungs of the professional ladder, we face a critical continuity crisis in the next decade. The enterprise relies on the nuanced judgment of veteran employees, but it is systematically dismantling the pipeline required to produce them. The assumption that AI will eventually manage the high-level strategic thinking as well is a massive, massive gamble that organizations are currently taking by default, just to save on near-term headcount.
It is also worth looking at the inverse of the data. The study indicates that roughly a third of the U.S. workforce currently sits at 0% AI exposure. And these are predominantly roles requiring localized physical interaction, cooks, bartenders, lifeguards, trade workers.
This is a classic demonstration of Moravec's paradox. The tasks we historically deemed to require high-level cognitive intelligence, advanced mathematics, logic, coding, are turning out to be relatively trivial for computational models to replicate. Conversely, the sensor and motor skills required to navigate a chaotic physical environment, which humans perform with subconscious ease, remain incredibly difficult and expensive to automate.
Folding laundry is harder than writing a Python script.
Exactly. For the immediate future, the physical world remains a resilient domain for human labor, while the cognitive domain is experiencing rapid commoditization.
Now, Anthropic CEO Dario Amodei has been very vocal regarding the severity of these trends. The rundown notes that his warnings have coincided with actual market volatility. It specifically cites instances where AI industry stock prices have tanked following major Claude model releases, as investors internalize the truly disruptive potential of these systems. Yet the broader institutional response remains incredibly sluggish. We are drastically underprepared.
And the friction Anthropic is experiencing extends way beyond labor market warnings. They are currently entangled in a very significant dispute with the United States military apparatus, which highlights a fundamental ideological clash regarding the deployment of frontier AI systems.
Let's analyze that conflict because it is fascinating. The rundown indicates that the Pentagon has officially designated Anthropic as a, quote, supply chain risk.
Which is a heavy label for a software company.
Very heavy.
Yeah.
And Anthropic is planning to challenge this designation in court. What makes this timeline particularly complex and ironic is that this designation arrives amidst reports that the two entities had recently resumed discussions regarding potential deals and contracts.
To understand the root of this conflict, we have to analyze the fundamental ethos of Anthropic alongside the absolute operational requirements of the Department of Defense. Anthropic was founded by researchers who splintered from OpenAI with a specific, rigid focus on AI alignment and safety. They architected their models, specifically the Claude family, with an internal constitution designed to prevent the generation of harmful outputs.
Right, constitutional AI.
Yes. The models are rigorously trained to refuse requests that violate these commercial safety guardrails, whether that involves generating code for cyber exploits, providing instructions for bioweapons, or assisting in tasks deemed unethical.
They optimized for a helpful, harmless, and honest corporate framework.
Exactly. Now, transpose that helpful and harmless corporate framework into a tactical military environment. The Department of Defense requires systems that execute commands with absolute reliability and unfiltered tactical capability. If a military unit is utilizing an AI model to analyze real-time satellite telemetry, coordinate electronic warfare countermeasures, or identify adversarial troop formations, the system cannot possess an internal ethical override that causes it to refuse a command.
Yeah, you can't have the AI say, I'm sorry, I cannot assist with targeting.
Exactly. A model pausing to evaluate the ethical implications of a targeting coordinate is a critical operational failure. It gets people killed.
So the supply chain risk designation might not actually be about traditional cybersecurity vulnerabilities at all. It is not about a backdoor in the code that allows foreign access. It is about the fundamental reliability of the model's architecture in a theater of war. Dario Amodei has previously used the term safety theater to describe certain industry practices. Is the Pentagon essentially sending a message here that consumer-grade commercial safety theater is an unacceptable liability for national defense?
That is the core of the ideological clash. The civilian AI sector is heavily incentivized to build guardrails to mitigate public relations disasters and prevent broad societal harm. The military sector requires unrestricted utility. The Pentagon is sending a definitive signal to the frontier labs. If you wish to integrate into the national security infrastructure, the consumer-grade alignment protocols must be stripped out. The outcome of Anthropic's legal challenge is going to set the precedent for how frontier models are bifurcated for civilian versus military application going forward.
It forces a massive choice between commercial ethics and lucrative defense contracting.
Wow. Let's pivot to the final section of our rundown. We have several quick hits from the broader ecosystem that provide a really good macro view of how rapidly these technologies are integrating across different sectors just on this specific date, March 6th.
Let's review the ecosystem updates.
First up, we have an infrastructure update from Google. They have released an open-source command line interface, or CLI, for their Google Workspace suite. This CLI comes preloaded with over 40 built-in agent skills designed specifically for integration into agentic platforms.
This development maps directly back to our analysis of GPT-5.4's desktop dominance from segment 1. We spent the last 40 years developing graphical user interfaces, the GUI, to allow humans to interact with computers intuitively via visual metaphors like desktops, folders, and icons. Now we are reverse engineering the interaction model.
We are ripping the GUI out for the AI.
Yes. Google is releasing a CLI to allow autonomous agents to bypass the GUI entirely. By providing pre-built agent skills, Google is acknowledging that the future of enterprise software involves agents interacting directly with the underlying data structures of docs, sheets, and Drive via code, rather than a human or an AI clicking a visual mouse. It is a core infrastructure required to scale the agent-as-a-service model efficiently.
Next on the rundown, we see a massive push in the democratization of visual media. Lightricks just released LTX 2.3, which is a highly capable open-source video model. Crucially, they also released LTX Desktop, which is a free local video editor built entirely on that open-source engine.
This serves as a perfect counterweight to the Ben Affleck and Netflix acquisition we discussed. While InterPositive is building highly specialized proprietary workflow tools for Tier 1 Hollywood productions, Lightricks is distributing immensely powerful generative and editing capabilities directly to the consumer level at zero cost.
Anyone with a decent GPU can run it.
Right. It compresses the timeline for independent creators, allowing an individual operating on a local machine to execute visual effects workflows that previously required a dedicated studio infrastructure. The barrier to entry for high-fidelity visual media is effectively collapsing today.
And speaking of collapsing barriers, let's look at a development that addresses the physical labor market we discussed earlier. Bob McGrew, the former chief research officer at OpenAI, is raising $70 million at a $700 million valuation for his new startup, Arda Robotics. Arda is building an AI platform specifically designed to automate factory floors with robots.
This is the critical vector attempting to solve more of X paradox. We noted that physical blue-collar roles currently exhibit 0% AI exposure because the sensor-motor integration in robotics has severely lagged behind the cognitive capabilities of large language models. But Bob McGrew was a central figure in architecting the cognitive reasoning of frontier models at OpenAI.
He knows how the brains work.
He does. And by directing that specific expertise toward the physical domain, Arda is attempting to bridge the gap. They are working to embed the deep reasoning capabilities of a GPT-class model into the physical chassis of an industrial robot. When that integration is successfully achieved at commercial scale, that 0% exposure rate for hands-on labor will rapidly evaporate.
The cognitive models are definitively entering the physical workspace. Finally today, we have a significant legal and privacy development. Meta is currently facing a lawsuit following an investigation which revealed that overseas contractors who were employed to review footage captured by Ray-Ban AI smart glasses were routinely exposed to nudity and other highly sensitive private user content.
This incident crystallizes the theoretical privacy concerns we discussed regarding the congressional anonymity bill into a very tangible reality. The value proposition of wearable AI, like the Ray-Ban smart glasses, is ambient intelligence. It is a system that constantly observes your environment to provide contextual assistance. However, the models powering that intelligence require continuous optimization.
And that optimization involves humans.
Exactly. It often involves a data labeling pipeline where human contractors in offshore server farms review the captured footage for quality control.
The friction here is just immense. The user puts on the glasses and believes they are interacting with a closed-loop technological system within the privacy of their own home. But the underlying architecture of model training means that intimate data is being routed to human reviewers across the globe.
It exposes the extreme vulnerability of the private sphere in the era of ambient data collection. We are voluntarily wearing sensors that record our physical reality, while simultaneously facing legislative pushes that seek to eliminate our digital privacy online. The Meta lawsuit is an empirical example of a systemic privacy erosion occurring as these systems scale. It all ties together.
It really is a profound convergence of issues today. The operational capabilities of the agents, the displacement of entry-level labor, the physical integration of robotics, and the rapid dissolution of privacy. If you require this level of unvarnished, deep-dive intelligence delivered consistently without interruption, you need to access our ads-free feed. It's called DjamgaMind, and it is available right now on Apple Podcasts. The direct link is located in the show notes. To synthesize all the disparate data points from today's rundown, we are observing a multi-domain systemic shock. We analyze the technical reality of GPT-5.4, achieving human-level competence and operating a desktop environment, fundamentally altering the economics of knowledge work. We observed the strategic integration of AI in physical workflows, legitimized by industry veterans like Ben Affleck, while companies like Arda prepare to push those cognitive capabilities straight onto the factory floor. We quantified the human impact of this shift via Anthropic's labor data, revealing a silent crisis as the entry-level pipeline for next-generation professionals is systematically closed off.
And we documented the massive institutional friction generated by this acceleration. The Pentagon is actively rejecting the commercial guardrails of frontier models, demanding tactical utility over alignment. Simultaneously, legislative bodies are advancing blunt instruments to strip digital anonymity, struggling to manage a landscape where the distinction between human and autonomous agent is rapidly degrading. The systems of the previous decade are structurally inadequate for the reality of the current technological frontier.
It is a dense, highly consequential landscape. As we close today's analysis, consider the practical implications of the data we have reviewed. If an autonomous AI agent like GPT-5.4 can now navigate a computer 3% better than you can, and Congress is actively pushing to strip your anonymity just to figure out who is human and who is a bot, at what point does your digital identity stop being yours and start becoming a shared workspace between you, your AI, and the government?
That is the structural reality we are currently architecting. Think about that the next time you log in.
Keep questioning the data, remain critical of the narratives, and we will continue to map the frontier with you. Until the next deep dive.
That concludes our rundown for March 6th. The signal for today is total integration. Whether it's the AI integrating into your desktop, Ben Affleck integrating AI into film, or the government integrating your ID into the web, the external AI era is over. The internal AI era has begun. If you're listening on AI Unraveled, thank you to our sponsors Area and DjamgaMind. If you want this briefing without the interruptions, join our ads-free community at the link below. If you're on the DjamgaMind feed, thank you for supporting independent, ad-free intelligence. I'm Etienne Newman. Until tomorrow, keep unraveling the future. And before you go, if your company is building the tools that power the workflows we talked about today, I'd love to showcase them to this audience. We don't just run ads, we build technical simulations that prove your value. Let's build something together. Visit jamgamind.com/partners to get started. Until next time, keep building.